My name is Maya, and before I tell you how I tore my family's world down to the exact penny, I have one quick question for you. Where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. I love reading where everyone tunes in from. And if you're ready for a story about cold, calculated payback, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on the bell notification, and join the family. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single detail. The sterling silver fork felt heavy in my hand, cold enough to chill my palm despite the stifling heat of the dining room. It was my 25th birthday, but there was no cake on the mahogany table. There were no balloons, no banners, and certainly no warmth. Just a half-eaten roasted chicken, a bottle of cheap white wine, and the two people who had spent my entire life pretending to be my mother and father. Arthur and Eleanor Vance sat across from me. Arthur was dabbing his thin lips with a cloth napkin, his eyes darting toward the chandelier as if counting the brass fixtures. Eleanor was swirling the pale wine in her glass, her manicured fingers tapping a slow, arrogant rhythm against the crystal stem. Maya, Arthur began, clearing his throat with a manufactured cough that held zero genuine emotion. You're 25 today, an adult by every legal and practical metric. And frankly, your mother and I have carried this charade far enough. I set my fork down with a quiet clink against the porcelain plate. What charade, Dad? Eleanor scoffed, a short, sharp bark of laughter that sent a shiver down my spine. Don't call him that, dear. It's always made my skin crawl. Let's be entirely transparent. You're smart enough to have pieced it together by now anyway. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the polished table. Her eyes, cold and calculating, locked onto mine. You weren't a miracle baby, Maya. You were a business decision. When your biological parents abandoned you at 6 months old, the state was desperate for placement. The specialized medical and developmental stipend attached to your guardianship was substantial. Monthly direct deposits, tax exemptions, state housing grants, it added up to a very comfortable lifestyle for us. Arthur chimed in, nodding in agreement as if reviewing a quarterly financial report. We gave you a roof, private schooling, and 3 meals a day. We fulfilled our side of the legal arrangement. But the state subsidy ended on your 25th birthday. As of midnight, the checks stop. I sat completely motionless. I felt the air leave my lungs, but I refused to let my chest heave. I refused to give them the satisfaction of a single tear, so 25 years of soccer practice, birthday presents, family holidays. It was all just a paycheck? Precisely, Eleanor said smoothly, taking a deliberate sip of her wine. And before you start dramatic sobbing or threaten to contest anything, let us save you the legal fees. We met with our estate attorney yesterday afternoon. The house, the investment portfolios, the trust funds, everything is structured tightly. We have officially cut you out of the will entirely. You get nothing. Not a cent, not a piece of furniture, not a photo album. You have 30 days to pack your things and vacate our property. They both looked at me, waiting for the collapse. They expected me to scream, to weep, to beg on my knees for the love they had expertly faked for 2 decades. They wanted the drama. They wanted the satisfaction of discarding me like an expired subscription service. Instead, a slow, icy calm washed over me. The pain that had flared in my chest just seconds prior hardened into pure, diamond-grade resolve. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms comfortably. A faint, knowing smile pulled at the corner of my lips. Are you finished? I asked quietly. Arthur frowned, clearly thrown off by my lack of panic. Maya, did you hear what your mother said? You are completely cut off. You have no family, no inheritance, and nowhere to go. That's where you're wrong, Arthur, I said, dropping his name for the very first time in my life. The impact hit him like a physical slap. His jaw tightened instantly. I slowly raised my hand, pointing my index finger directly past Arthur's left shoulder, toward the grand floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked our long, gated driveway. My real family found me months ago, I said, my voice steady, smooth, and echoing softly in the quiet room. They're right over there. Arthur and Eleanor both froze. Slowly, synchronized in their confusion, they turned around in their high-backed chairs to look out the window. At that exact second, as if on absolute cue, 2 massive black SUVs rounded the curved driveway, their headlights cutting through the darkening dusk like twin searchlights. They pulled up right onto the manicured front lawn, crushing Eleanor's prized white rose bushes beneath heavy rubber tires. The headlights beamed straight through the glass, illuminating our dining room in a harsh, blinding white light. Before Arthur could spring out of his chair to yell about his lawn, the front gates didn't just swing open, they slowly clicked shut, locking automatically from the outside. The dark-tinted doors of both SUVs opened simultaneously. 4 men in tailored charcoal suits stepped out into the evening air, followed by an older woman carrying a sleek, leather-bound briefcase. Eleanor gasped, dropping her wine glass. It shattered against the parquet floor, splashing pale red liquid across her designer shoes. What is the meaning of this? Who are those people on my property? They aren't on your property, Eleanor, I said, standing up gracefully from the table and smoothing down my dress. Because as of 8 o'clock this morning, this property belongs to them, and the forensic audit of every single dollar you stole from my biological estate over the last 25 years officially begins right now. The moment the words left my mouth, Arthur's face turned an unsightly shade of crimson. He scrambled out of his chair, nearly knocking it over, and marched toward the glass doors with his fist clenched. Is this a joke? He bellowed, his voice straining. This house is under the Vance family trust. You haven't owned $1 in your life, Maya, and whatever theater troupe you hired to park on my lawn is getting arrested for trespassing. I wouldn't open those doors if I were you, Arthur, I said smoothly, picking up my glass of ice water and taking a deliberate sip. The woman with the leather briefcase is Victoria Sterling. She's the senior managing partner at Sterling, Vance, the original firm your grandfather built before you squandered your share on terrible real estate ventures in Dubai. Arthur froze mid-stride, his hand hovering inches from the brass door handle. His knuckles were bone white. How do you know that name? Because Victoria isn't just an attorney, I replied, walking slowly around the table, my heels clicking rhythmic, cold beats against the hardwood floor. She's my biological aunt, my father's older sister. Eleanor let out a sharp, hysterical laugh, though her hand trembled violently as she gripped the edge of the dining table. That's impossible. Your biological parents were destitute nobodies. The state agency told you exactly what my real family paid them to tell you, I interrupted, leaning down so my face was level with hers. 24 years ago, my biological father, Julian Sterling, was targeted by a brutal corporate extortion scheme. People were killed, Eleanor. Real, dangerous people were looking for him and his family. To keep me safe, my father did the only thing a desperate man could do. He staged an abandonment, routed a massive trust fund through a state ward program, and placed me with a middle-class family who had high-level security clearance and zero imagination. I smiled, watching the color drain entirely from Eleanor's face. He chose you because you were greedy, I continued softly. He knew that for $25,000 a month, you wouldn't ask questions. You wouldn't dig into my lineage. You would just cash the checks, buy your designer shoes, and keep me fed until the heat died down and the legal battles were won. The glass doors creaked open, and Victoria Sterling stepped inside, flanked by 2 imposing security officers. Her gray hair was pulled into a flawless, razor-sharp bun, and her tailored charcoal suit screamed old money and absolute authority. She didn't even glance at Arthur or Eleanor. Her sharp eyes found mine, softening just a fraction. "Happy 25th birthday, Maya," Victoria said, her voice like polished velvet. "You look just like your father." "Thank you, Aunt Victoria," I said. "Did the final filings clear?" "At exactly 5 p.m. today," Victoria replied, unzipping her leather briefcase and pulling out a thick sheaf of legal documents bound in blue cardstock. The Sterling estate has formally reclaimed all assets funneled through the wardship program. Furthermore, we executed the clawback clause hidden in paragraph 14 of the original custody agreement. Arthur rounded on Victoria, his breathing shallow and ragged. "What clause? What are you talking about? We raised her. We have a contract." Victoria turned her head slowly, tears streaming down her cheeks as if he were a mildly ushered down the hallway by the guards on her sleeve. Belongings. "A contract you breached 3 months ago, Mr. Vance, looking like a hollow shell of the man who sat down to dinner less than an hour ago. Right into the puddle of spilled white wine." Victoria walked over to me, placing a warm, gentle hand on my shoulder. "The monthly stipend you held your ground beautifully, Maya. A few basic parameters. Your father would be immensely proud of you. Maintaining a safe environment. Is he? Providing adequate support. Is he really support, okay?" And, I asked, most importantly, my composure softening as an equal beneficiary of the household. "He's waiting for you at the estate in 3 months ago, Victoria you took out a second mortgage on this house and listed Maya's forged signature as a co-signer to secure a $2 million business loan. The threats are gone." Eleanor gasped. "The moment we cleared his parasites out of your husband, Your private jet
Arthur
is ready on the tarmac.
You did what?
You're finally going home.
Arthur stammered,
30 minutes
stepping
later,
backward.
Arthur and
It was a
Eleanor
sure
walked
thing.
back down the grand staircase.
The tech startup in
carrying
Austin.
two
It
battered
was guaranteed
leather suitcases.
returns.
The
I was
only
going to
things
pay it back
Victoria's
before she
legal
turned
team
25.
permitted them to keep. The startup went
They looked
bankrupt
utterly
last
defeated,
Tuesday, Arthur, I said,
stripped of the
stepping
wealth,
up next to
status,
Victoria,
and smug superiority.
and because you
they had
forged
worn
my
like
signature
armor
on
for
federal
decades.
loan documents, you
As
committed
they walked
grand
toward
fraud.
the open front doors,
But it gets
flanked
better.
by security,
Do you know who bought
Arthur
our
stopped
stopped
and
and
turned
turned
back
from the
to look
bank
at me
48
one
hours
last
ago?
time? What are you
Arthur's
going to
eyes
do with the
dilated
house?
with
He
sheer
whispered,
panic,
his voice
No,
hoarse.
no.
I picked up my glass
My
of
family
ice water,
did, I whispered,
taking a final
leaning
refreshing
across to him.
sip before meeting
We own
his
your
gaze.
loan, Arthur. We own
I'm
your
having
mortgage.
it demolished on Monday.
We own the
I said
car in your
flatly.
garage.
The
And I'm
watch is in
turning
your
the land
safe,
into a public
and the ground
park
you're
dedicated
standing
to
on right
foster
now.
youth aging out of the system.
You thought you were cutting
so
me out of
real
your petty
children
little
can
will
get
tonight?
the actual
That's
support they
adorable.
deserve. Instead
I
of
bought
being
your
used as
entire
a meal
life
ticket
ticket
by
by
even
people
sat
like
down
you.
for appetizer salad.
Arthur choked
Victoria
back over her
tapped her
watch, but the security guards
It is
gave him
currently
a firm nudge
8:15
forward.
p.m., Mr. Vance.
Eleanor didn't
You
even
and your
turn
wife
around.
have exactly 45
She just
minutes
kept
to
walking
take
into
whatever
the
personal
cool night
clothing
air,
can fit into
where
two
two
standard
unmarked
suitcases.
police cruisers were already
After
pulling
that,
up behind
my
the black
security team will
SUVs,
escort you off the
their
premises.
red and blue lights flashing
The locks are
silently
being
against the
rekeyed as we
darkness.
speak.
You can't
I
do
stood
this.
in the doorway,
Eleanor
watching as the
shrieked.
luxury
Tears
life they
finally
had built
bursting
on
past
lies
her
fell
mascara,
apart completely in
ruining
the
the
driveway.
perfect, arrogant
The
facade she had
handcuffs
worn for
clicked into
25
place.
years. The door slammed shut.
We gave you
and the
25 years of our
taillights
lives.
faded
You
into
owe
the
us.
distance. I looked at
For
Eleanor,
25
feeling
years,
no
I
anger,
thought I was an
no
unwanted
regret,
orphan,
only
surviving
the
on the
cold,
conditional
satisfying
charity
thrill
of
strangers.
complete victory.
But as I
You
walked
didn't
out
give me
onto the front
25
porch
years,
and
Eleanor,
stepped into the back
I
of my
said,
family's SUV,
pointing toward the open
looking
front
back
door
at the
where the
empty
moving
house
trucks
one last
were already
time,
pulling up
I
behind
knew
the
the
black
truth.
SUVs.
I
You
wasn't a
rented
charity
me,
case,
and your
I
lease
was
just
sterling.
expired.
And the
Eleanor
debt had
collapsed
finally
back
been
into her
settled
chair,
in full,
burying
her face in her hands, as silent, violent sobs racked her body. Arthur stood frozen, staring at the blue folder floating in the puddle of spilled wine. The reality was setting in, thick and suffocating. They hadn't just lost their hold over me. They had systematically dismantled their own lives out of sheer arrogance and greed. 44 minutes, Mr. Vance, Victoria reminded him, her voice dripping with ice. I suggest you start with your wardrobe. The federal agents waiting outside will want you properly dressed when they serve the warrants for financial fraud tomorrow morning. Arthur's eyes snapped up, wide with terror. Warrants? You brought federal agents? You forged a signature on a federally insured loan, Arthur, I said, leaning against the edge of the mahogany table, my arms crossed. Did you really think my family would just let you walk away with a slap on the wrist after treating me like an expense report for 25 years? Every dollar you siphoned from my biological fund was tracked. Every vacation to Cabo, every designer bag for Eleanor, every country club membership fee, it's all documented. You didn't just steal from a trust. You embezzled from the Sterling estate. 2 security officers stepped forward, opening the heavy wooden doors to the master bedroom corridor and gesturing for Arthur and Eleanor to move. Eleanor stood up slowly, her knees trembling so badly she had to hold onto the table for support. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of terror, anger, and a desperate, pathetic plea for mercy. Maya, please, we raised you. We took you to the hospital when you had the measles. We sat in the front row at your college graduation. Doesn't any of that count for something? I looked at her, searching my heart for even a flicker of the girl who used to crave her approval, the child who tried so hard to be perfect just to earn a single genuine smile. But that girl was gone, replaced by someone who knew her true worth. You sat in the front row at my graduation because the trust paid for your VIP seating, Eleanor, I said softly, my voice devoid of anger, carrying only absolute finality. And you took me to the hospital because if I died, the monthly checks stopped. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending it was love.